Good evening. If we could all please rise to begin the meeting with the prayer. Dear God, as this session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. Please salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. This is a special meeting of the City Council. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Councilor Rourke?
Here.
Councilor Samaras?
Here.
Councilor Belanger?
Here.
Mayor Elliott?
Here.
Councilor Kennedy?
Here.
Councilor Leahy?
Here.
Councilor Martin?
Here.
Councilor Mercia?
Here.
Councilor Milanazzo?
Here. 9 present. This is a special meeting notice. I'd like to read the notice. Notice is hereby given as required by Rule 6 of the Lowell City Council. City Council rules that the Lowell City Council will hold a special meeting of the Lowell City Council in the council chambers on Tuesday, March 25th at 6 p.m. The purpose of which is to meet as the committee of a whole in order to conduct interviews with 2 of 6 finalists for the position of city manager of Lowell. The first beginning at 6 p.m., followed by the second beginning at or about 7:30 p.m. The public is invited to attend. By order, Rodney M. Elliott, Mayor of the City, Angela Giccia, Acting City Clerk. Before we proceed with the meeting, we had one candidate did drop out. Ms. Gallery, if you could just report on that before we proceed any further.
At about 5:10 tonight, I received a call from Robert Bruner that he was withdrawing his interview for the position of city manager. He was notified at the same time that he received notification that he got an interim position. He didn't say where, but I believe it was Michigan. He sends his apologies. He was also going to send me an email. I haven't received it yet, but if anybody wants it, I'll forward it to them. I was able to get in touch with the second candidate who was on his way, and he is here now and thought he would be here by 6 o'clock.
Thank you. So we will proceed with the second interview at the 6 p.m. time slot. Before we proceed, I'd like to recognize Councilor Reedy Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to offer a moment of silence in darkened chamber to a woman I have long since admired, Eileen B. McDermott. I never met the woman, nor I have known her personally, but I feel this warrants the honor. Eileen McDermott was a former Lowell resident for more than 50 years, having been born here in the city of Lowell. She was a veteran of World War II and served in the United States Navy as a seaman first class. Eileen was a retired police officer for the Lowell Police Department and was a forerunner in those fields, usually dominated by men. And looking around me, I can relate to that. As a police officer, she investigated numerous child abuse cases and crimes against women and received many awards for her investigative efforts. Family members include 3 sons, Jack, David, Jim, and a daughter, Mary Beth, 5 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-grandchild. We offer our sympathy to her family, relatives, and many friends, and I'd like to offer a moment of silence in darkened chamber to all those who have died since our last City Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Could we all please rise and stand with darkened chambers in a moment of silence? May you rest in peace. So we proceed with the first interview. I will remind members, rules that were adopted, there will be a 10-minute opening statement, along with a 10-minute closing statement, or up to a 10-minute closing statement. Each member of the city council will have 10 minutes for question and answers. Once I make the introduction, I'll join you in the well, and we'll begin the questions with Council Rourke, proceeding with Council Samaras, and then alphabetically. Council Marcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is someone here keeping track of the time? Okay, thank you.
We have Mr. Manager. And before we proceed, following the interviews, would we like to set up a special meeting for, to go through the process of electing a new city manager? Following Thursday, we will have to ensure that we have proper posting and there's a time frame associated with that. Council Marcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would only propose that the last interview would be Thursday. We would have Friday and the whole weekend to make our selection and go over all the previous interviews. Then I would suggest that we have you call a special meeting for Monday at 6 o'clock, Monday being March 31st. If that is the case, then after the last interview, which would be Thursday, we would have to post that in advance for the paper. We need adequate time to call for that special meeting if my colleagues approve.
Okay, is that in the form of a motion, Council
Yes.
Marcia? Motion by
Yes.
Council Marcia to establish a special meeting for March 31st, Monday at 6 p.m. Second by Councilor Rourke. Roll call.
Council Rourke?
Yes.
Councilor Samaras?
Yes.
Councilor Belanger?
Yes.
Mayor Elliott?
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilor Leahy?
Yes.
Councilor Martin?
Yes.
Councilor Mercia?
Yes.
Council Milonazo?
Yes.
9 yeas, motion carries. So, moving to the original item, why don't we'd like to invite our first candidate, if you can kindly walk through the gate and have a seat at the table. I'll see if I can get you a glass of water. Our first candidate is Mr. Peter Grazikowski. Welcome to Lowell, and welcome to the Lowell City Council chambers. Thank you, Council. Council Milonazo was kind enough to get you a glass of water. So without any further ado, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
We'll begin.
Thank you.
What a good boy. You're the best.
Mr. Grazikowski.
For the purposes of this meeting, please feel free to address me as Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
It's a difficult last name, and don't want to insist on that if we don't have to. Let me introduce myself a little bit. I have worked in public service for over 20 years, most of it in Massachusetts, although my last two positions were in Connecticut and Rhode Island. This is truly what I want to do. This is what I've always done, and I feel that my background and experience very well suited to this type of the position. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting and business management, and I have a graduate degree in human resource management and MBA. I also hold a Juris Doctor, and I am licensed to practice law in Massachusetts. I went to school at night, worked through college. Therefore, despite my age, I did accumulate a lot of professional experience. I have worked for the cities of Chicopee in Massachusetts, for the city of Springfield, and then I worked for the town of Vernon in Connecticut and city of East Providence in Rhode Island most recently. I have served in positions that, again, are pretty well suited to this type of job. I have background in finance, financial management, budgeting, where I was part of the Springfield Finance Control Board team in Springfield, Massachusetts, where we turned around the city. It came back from a $40 million problem to where it is today. Also very similar to City of Lowell in terms of performance management and budgeting, having a city stat team that's unfortunately no longer there, but they were there at the time, and I know they were very, very helpful in turning the city around. Also organizational change and organization development that I was part of in Springfield, where we made a lot of changes in how we did business, and I know that's very indicative of how this city has been run and how it was able to be so successful today. In town of Vernon, I served as the assistant town administrator and also served as the human resource director. It was, again, similar city, maybe not in size, but it had a makeup of 12 council people, a mayor, a town administrator, and a town meeting. So to be able to do business with this type of setting, you pretty much can do business anywhere, I always said. And that was a very, very good experience as well. And most recently, East Providence, which was, again, very similar to Springfield, perhaps, in terms of financial problems, and we're able to turn around that particular environment from, a deficit, structural deficit, accumulated deficit to a surplus in less than 2 years. So this is where I come from. Again, I think this is a skill set that would fit very well here. I am very humbled and honored to be here among the other candidates. I know this is a position that a lot of people have their sights set on, and for a good reason. This is a city that has made tremendous strides recently, that had an upgrade from Standard & Poor's that, have gone a very long way in a short period of time. If you look back to 2005 or 2006, where you guys were and where you are now. And there are challenges that I'd be ready to take on. Speaking of projected next 5 years, where you have some projected deficit that have to be tackled and how to do it, looking at OPEB liabilities and pension liabilities, looking at your infrastructure and what to do with the school buildings and things you face maybe with the new high school. So those are things I'd be ready to take on, and that's why I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Grazikowski. Can we proceed with the first line of questioning? Council Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Peter, thank you very much for coming in on a little bit of a short notice tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Much appreciated. Thank you. So first off, what is it about the city of Lowell that attracted you to apply for this position?
Professionally, it's a great challenge. It's a budget that is slightly larger than I worked with most recently. It's sort of in between my other experience. The city of Springfield had a budget of over $500 million, but also I was not in the top tier of management there. I was working my way to it. So this is my opportunity professionally to take on this challenge with the experience I have and obviously tackle the type of problems I have tackled before successfully. So I do feel that this is a good fit in terms of what the challenges are, what the issues are, because I have done this before, and the size of the organization is something that I am very interested in, and I know would be a good fit for me professionally.
Have you ever been to the city before on a visit or through work
Yes,
experience?
I have visited the city a couple times. I am familiar from my research with the neighborhoods, with the issues. So this is obviously an area that's very interesting, very diverse, with a lot of growth potential.
And with some specifics, what is it about your experience and your background that makes you the best fit for Lowell City Manager?
I think it's taking where the city has gotten so far and maintaining the fiscal responsibility that the city of Lowell has gotten to, and taking it further, focusing on these areas that remain, looking long-term, which is the infrastructure that faces a lot of cities, not just Lowell, obviously, but, the bigger the city, the bigger the problems sometimes become. Looking into the regional approach, probably to more extent than in the past, and I know this has sort of been the focus of smaller communities, but there is no reason why a bigger city shouldn't look at regionalization on a bigger scale. And looking at the long-term liabilities of, pension and OPEB. Those are the things that I have a lot of experience with, and I think I could be very instrumental in helping the city and taking it further and keeping it on the straight financial path and making it successful.
Thank you. Here in Lowell, as I'm sure you may or may not know, there are many key positions that need to be filled. A CFO, a Director of Planning and Development, Associate Planners, and so forth. As you being our next city manager, you'll be required to fill those positions. While they are a challenge, it does present a unique opportunity for both yourself and for the city. How would you approach the hiring of that key personnel?
I'm glad you phrased it that way, that it's not just a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. I've been in this boat recently, and I like to think it wasn't me, but when I was in my most recent position, I had key personnel leave, mostly for the reason that I think that the city came under fiscal oversight and, the dynamics changed and there was a lot of uncertainty. But we had the financial directors on both the city and the school site resign. We had the HR directors on both sides resign. We had a superintendent that left of schools. So those were all key positions, a lot of institutional knowledge that just evaporated overnight. I saw it more as an opportunity to an extent that, we had a lot of opportunities for consolidation, and this is exactly what we did over there. We consolidated financial management, all the back office functions, HR, finance, IT, facilities, all the back office operations that could have been consolidated, we did, and we hired people for these positions. They wanted to do it. That they weren't just stuck with that consolidation saying, all right, now I got to do 2 jobs. It was really just one job, but it had a broader look, and it provided more cohesiveness. So it was an opportunity, and the way we went about it, of course, we had to advertise, we had to attract people. There were the right kind of people for these positions, and they were really interested in doing it. Sometimes you have this talent inside, and that's great, and you always hope that these people will come forward and apply for the positions, but sometimes you don't, and that's where you broaden the search and try to attract people that will be a good fit. And, really a good fit is what you're looking for when you fill these key positions, somebody you can work with.
Thank you. And finally, for me, sometimes, especially as Lowell City Manager, you may find yourself in a disagreement with one or more city councilors. How would you handle those situations?
Always politely and professionally. That was always my MO, that I serve, for everybody in the same fashion. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't. In my most recent position, I had, unfortunately, a lot of disagreements that I knew I was doing the right thing, and I had to do certain things because they were either legally or professionally required. But the majority vote prevailed in some areas, and that's something you have to learn to live with. At the end of the day, you are the boss. So whatever policy decisions you make, I can convince you that this is maybe not the way to go, or maybe we should go another way, but you're going to make that decision, and my job is to make it happen. So, this is how I see it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Samaras?
Thank you.
Council Samaras?
Mr. Grazikowski, thank you for being a candidate here in Lowell. We appreciate this. All right, my first question. Like most municipalities across the country, we're finding it increasingly difficult to maintain services without a tax increase. How would you guide the council and the community to make the difficult choices if we're not going to have a tax increase, budget reductions, and where? Or raising revenues to maintain that service? I think you've shown that you've had a basic understanding of Lowell at this point. Lowell's been very successful, and it must continue to grow. So based on this question, how would you deal with the issue?
Yeah, I think a lot of cities get to the point where you have done as much cutting as you could. And, in order to maintain the core services, and we all know what they are. There's schools, public safety, and public works. You have to look for ways to maybe provide them differently. It's impossible to keep cutting. And I think a lot of cities found themselves in that way. They're not able to retain personnel that they want. They're not able to provide service efficiently. And at the end of the day, you know, you have to look at some ways to raise the revenue, to generate more growth, or learn to provide services differently, whether it be regionalization, consolidation of how you do things. I know you guys have been great at introducing technology on how you run things, and you know that results in a lot of efficiencies. But again, you know, you can take it a little bit further, but you're going to run out of you know that aspect as well. So at the end of the day, it is the growth. You know, you cannot maintain, I think, zero levy increases forever, and you're at that point. In 15, you will have to make the choice, most likely, to say how much you will ask the taxpayers to pay to provide the level service. You know, with the union agreements you have in place, and you know, just to maintain the level service. Going forward, again, I think you want to focus maybe on how to provide these services a bit differently if you can. This would be my job to recommend, you know, different ways of doing it. And, you know, the first thing comes to mind is look inside, look internally at consolidations of these back office functions, see what else you can accomplish that you haven't thought of before. Second is, you know, look what else you can do partnering with other municipalities or private you know, partnerships, and see if you can go in that direction to provide services more efficiently. And you know, finally, there's always the fee-for-service approach. You know, in some respects, where instead of building into the tax levy indefinitely, you may want to look at what the taxpayers are willing to pay for on a fee basis, and say, you know, it's worth to me to do it, so I'm going to be the one paying for that service I want to get. And again, this is something that requires a lot of public input because it tends to be very controversial. So whether the council wants to go in that direction or not is entirely up to the council and what the public will say. But, you know, those are the major areas to look at and say, you know, how you're going to take it in that direction. But inevitably, you will have, you know, some tax increases just because you reach that critical point, I think, that to maintain the level of service that you have, the basic level of services, and to invest in your infrastructure that you have to do going forward, you know, not to be in a position where you have to all of a sudden build, you know, a few new buildings. You may have to start increasing the levy a little bit going forward.
Thank you. I noticed you had extensive experience dealing with unions, but I'd like to have you describe your experience with labor relations, collective bargaining, and arbitration. And if you can, what strategies have you found to be most effective or ineffective dealing with unions? And then basically, can you identify a success with the union negotiations that you could cite us as an example?
Okay. I've been fortunate to be part of the negotiating team both on the municipal and the school side, and the two most recent communities that I worked at, both in Connecticut and Rhode Island. And that also gives you a lot of perspective to see both sides of the coin. And I think also gives you an opportunity to standardize a lot of things in terms of benefits or how you structure compensation. And this was a very fortunate, you know, experience for me. So both in Connecticut and Rhode Island, I was able to, as part of these negotiating teams, kind of standardize a lot of these benefit packages. So between the school and the municipal side. The major driver in negotiations is, for me, it's not the short term, it's really the long term. And I think that's been some of the experience here in Lowell, from what I understand. You want to look at the long-term picture of the city's liabilities. So, you know, how much does the employee eventually going to cost you in terms of what you have to put away when they're not here? You know, those are the long-term strategies that the city has to take into account and figure out how to negotiate these things in. So as examples, I was able to reduce a lot of the OPEB liabilities by limiting the amount of time people were eligible to receive health care, you know, as a post-employment benefit, either for individual or family, in a family setting. also restructured on the pension side, some of the contributions, and we're able to do it in Connecticut because we had a local pension plan. So we're able to go to a defined contribution plan versus the defined benefit plan. And the long-term gains, in my mind, are more important. In the short term, you want to treat people fairly, obviously, but you have to be realistic as well. A good example of what we did on the compensation side was to tie it into a Social Security index. So it's a fair way of doing it, meaning that it's connected to market. People are going to receive a COLA, but it's capped. We capped it at 2%, and we said it's going to be equal to the Social Security index that's published for January the previous year. So we know we can afford it because it's tied to the market performance, and it's also fair because people will get it based on how the market performs. So those are examples of, treating people fairly, but realistically as far as what's going on in the market.
Thank you. As a city manager in Lowell, being involved in the community is very important. Please describe your plans for becoming more involved in our city.
Well, if I was selected for the position, obviously that would be one of the key aspects of it, to be able to, be as close with what's going on with the city as you can. And that means for a city manager a lot of times being very active with boards and commissions, obviously, because this is where a lot of the action is, and that's where a lot of volunteers are, and people that you appoint or get elected to these positions are. But it also means being present in the city functions and anything that the city is involved in or community is involved in. So that's a big part of the picture, to be able to be part of the fabric of the community, be at these events and enjoy them with your family. So this is obviously something I would look forward to.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, still time? Okay. We have a group of business leaders who are part of a public-private partnership. It's called the Lowell Plan. The mayor and the city manager are asked to be part of that board. Their purpose is to help the city deal with economic development. And they've done such things as surveys, hiring of consultants to do those surveys, supported initiatives like the Songus Arena, Walasha Park, being an active part, playing an active role. But sometimes with public-private partnerships, there are difficulties do arise, and over the years, that organization has received some strong support from the political powers, and sometimes weak support from the political powers. How do you see yourself as a city manager reacting with a board like that and working with that board? And do you see it of value as a city manager?
Well, I think you want to tap into any resource you can as long as it's beneficial to the city. I never thought of maybe taking sides, as long as there's benefit to it. So, if the surveys or research they provide or, feedback from the business community they provide is beneficial to the city, it's obviously a good resource. And you may want to recommend to that
But
particular...
for clarification,
Yeah.
it's things that the city would like to have, and they budget the requests of the Department of Planning and Development.
Okay.
But it's the whole idea of, a public-private partnership, can it work? Would you make it work? Do you feel it should work, or do you see yourselves working in isolation from that group?
Well, I think they do work. I have experience with them working. One of the examples was we have privatized the trash collection in East Providence, and it was a private-public partnership where we're able to successfully rehire some of the city employees in that partnership, provide a service at a much more economically viable level to the residents, and then we actually regionalized that service and offered it to other communities that surrounded us, and it worked out great. But again, it has to be a fit. Not everything is a good fit. I remember in Springfield, we try to look at public-private partnerships for other areas like street sweeping. It wasn't a good fit. because there was a loss of control, and to the extent that we just, weren't really happy with it. And the capital investment was, would have been too big to bring it back. So if it's a good fit, you do it. I think you investigate it, obviously, and if it's not, it's not. It depends on the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Guzikowski, we're going to continue with the beginning of the alphabetical order, and we'll proceed with Counsel Belanger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Peter, thank you for coming, and welcome to Lowell.
Thank you.
Must have been a nice scenic ride all the way from Edgartown to Lowell, Mass. I'm
Oh,
sure.
great.
Now, currently, do you reside in Edgartown, or?
Yes, we have a residence there, yes.
Okay, good for you. It's I frequent there in the summertime, quite a few, and it's a very special place. But I do have to ask, Peter, if you are selected as city manager here in Lowell, would you consider moving to Lowell in the area? It's not required.
Yes.
You would.
Absolutely. I don't think there was any other way to do it. As long as there's a commitment on both sides, to a period of time, absolutely. I don't think you could do this job being, remotely located.
Yeah, but we'd like to have
Not
you
that
here,
kind of
so.
job.
Okay, I know you'd leave very reluctantly, I'm sure, but that's good. That's great to hear, Peter. Thank you very much. But, Peter, reading your resume, one thing that stood out to me was very profound is your economic development background. You created a focused economic development division that was independent of planning and development.
Yes.
Now, this is something I think we should be doing here in Lowell. Currently, our planners are multitaskers, so to speak. They're doing several different things. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong, but I think we need to focus solely on economic development if we want to achieve our goals here in Lowell. We have a downtown that's a tad bit distressed, so to speak. We have, roughly a handful of storefront vacancies on one of our main streets. It's very disturbing. Throughout the city and other areas, I think we're doing very, very strongly. But this is our central business district. So please elaborate what this economic development division you created. Tell me what you achieved by it, and please elaborate a little bit. I'm very, very anxious.
Sure. It was a unique opportunity, I think, for me in Connecticut that we had, like most cities, a combined planning and economic development department. And oftentimes, it's not the same skill set, as you probably know. It's a different skill set to be a good planner. It's a different skill set to sell things. And that's really what it is. It's selling things. How do you sell the city? How do you make it grow? So we did separate that function, and I was fortunate to be able to attract a person that had a lot of background in private development, real estate development. And they brought a skill set to this new department or this new separate division that allowed us to sort of look at the situation with a different perspective. And that's exactly what we did. We hired a firm, a private firm, that was able to sort of put us on the map, as people often say, but they don't really know what they mean. But that's what we did. We're able to sell the town and its proximity to highways, its availability of TIF financing packages and other tax and energy incentives. It's facilities that have been dormant for a long time, but that were very attractive in terms of the price per square foot and the infrastructure. So it was really repackaging of what we had, because we had it, we just never really sold it. When I came in, I realized that there was really not a list out there for anybody to look at and say, I could move in here with my business and make it a go. Part of the problem was also that we didn't really have a very good welcome package, I like to call it, which is how quickly can I make my business a going concern, in your town. How long does it take to get a permit? How long is it going to be before zoning? So that was part of that approach. And it was up to that person to sort of integrate the resources between different departments and say, as an outsider, I'm coming in And if I was a business, what kind of red tape do I have to get through to get all the permits and get situated here? So it's not just knowing where I'm gonna go and that it's a good deal, but how long is it gonna take me to get there? Because if it's gonna be more than 2 weeks, maybe I'm gonna go somewhere else. And, you know, the success have been, you know, rather quick. We've been able to turn around probably 15% of our inventory within the first year of that change and attract businesses to come to Vernon. They never even thought about Vernon before because they didn't know that property was available and it was attractive enough for them to move there. So that was the approach. To some extent, I was able to do this in East Providence as well. We, again, had a lot of dormant properties that had just never been redeveloped. A lot of them, unfortunately, had remediation issues. So, you know, TIF financing was a good approach because we're able to make them attractive to developers through some, you know, TIF incentives to get the cleanup done. But permitting and streamlining the process was one of the big things we did over there, and making sure that people can get from point A to B really quickly as they are interested in the city. And that's something that, you know, I would recommend to anybody, you know, and I know people on different stages of doing it, but there are good models out there to follow.
Thank you, Peter. Sounds like a very proactive campaign. I like it very much. Now, just to elaborate a little bit, the tax rate in Lowell, residentially, is a very good value, quite frankly, considering the services we provide. We're lowest among the surrounding communities, and we certainly, I think, give a lot of bang for our buck, to be honest with you. But however, on the flip side, the commercial tax rate is nearly double, and it comes with usually a higher rate for water and sewer as well. How do you feel about this tax ratio? Do you think this creates a fertile environment to spur economic development and create jobs like we're aiming to do here currently in the city? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's obviously a policy decision. From my experience, you have to look at your competition and, you know, geographically. Some cities are in a situation where this is make or break for their economic development, because if they have a community next door that the tax rates are half, you know, on business side, and everything else being equal, so to speak, that's where these people will go, and you're gonna lose all that development. If you serve a hub where, you know, you have some advantages of your location and size and, you know, who you have for resources, then maybe it's not the worst thing, but you still wanna look at your, you know, whether you have this competitive advantage, of whether you're gonna be able to sustain it. And with any split rate, I think you're gonna have the dilemma, which is, you know, how high is too prohibitive to attract or retain business? So this is definitely a subject for doing some research and finding out whether you're at that breaking point, whether you should do something about the split rate and how much off it is, whether to maintain it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now, Peter, I'm assuming in Vernon and East Providence, you had some higher education institutions. Here in Lowell, we're going through a great development here. UMass Lowell is really developing here in the city at a rapid clip, and we have Middlesex Community College is doing a great job. In these respective towns that you did service, how did you incorporate these higher ed institutions to the city as far as economic development and marketing and whatnot?
Well, obviously, this is a great opportunity for collaboration. Whenever you have a center that, you know, attracts a lot of new residents, and that's who they are, you know, they located here for the time they're in college, and they bring a lot of resources. There's also an opportunity for leveraging some of the services that the college provides. So it's not just a question of, you know, pilot programs, which a lot of cities sort of focus on that and say, you know, I have to provide all these services, what do I get in return? Well, you do get a lot in return. And I think this is the part of the conversation that has to happen, you know, whether it's a hospital or a general hospital or whether it's a college, and see what type of things you can do together. You know, one of the examples that I always give is being able to have ready staff. And, you know, in a couple of communities I worked in, We had programs that we worked with colleges on. They were able to provide personnel to us, during the academic breaks or even during the semesters, where we were giving people a real-life experience, and we were meeting our need at little or no cost, and having these resources available to us through colleges. And then there's also the training programs that you can, work through your economic development person or board and say, those are the areas where we need more education and more training. And then you basically work with the institution of higher learning and tell them, based on what we're hearing, what we know from businesses, what's going on in our area, those are the type of programs that you may want to offer more, and this will help the area.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I don't know if, have you got a chance to review our budget this year? I don't know if it's been online, or did you get a chance to take a look at it?
I have looked at the FY14 and whatever was available for information for FY15.
Okay, well, what's, anything stand out? I know it's a different environment here. Anything stand out that you may have done differently, or that something was effective in your respective cities or whatnot? Anything in particular you want to elaborate on?
As I indicated before, there has been an excellent job done here, and there's no doubt that the city is in great financial shape. I did look at the 5-year forecast that brought me to what I stated before. This is sort of a breaking point where, in order to sustain the level of services and to provide some investment in infrastructure, there's going to be a need to look at the levy going forward. At the same time, what remains of concern to me is the progress in funding the unfunded liabilities. And in this budget, it's hard to do it. I mean, there's just no way around it. There's not going to be one magic bullet where you can put a lot of money into OPEB, let's say, trust, or into the pension situation. But going forward, this is something you want to look at, because this is going to be one of the drivers for the rating agency, and this is what I like to rely on in my strategic plan that's obviously on top of everything that you guys would give me and say, those are our priorities, we want you to focus on that. I want to look at what the rating agency tells me that I should do as manager for the city to get me from the very good rating that you have now to even a better rating. And that's one of the things they're saying. You have to look at that. Right now, it's not a big stressor, but it will be later. So unless you start thinking about it now, you're not going to be in good shape later. The same goes for infrastructure. You got to continue that investment.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Mr. Manager, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Grazikowski, I'm next in line, so I want to take a little break and.
No, let's keep going, Mayor.
Okay. One of the items, I have a number of questions on a few different areas, but can I ask you a little bit about the solid waste master plan that you referenced in your cover letter, and how did you restructure the waste management for savings?
Okay. This was sort of a unique situation in terms, well, maybe it's not for a lot of other communities, but there's a landfill in Springfield where it was partially capped in the process of, getting the rest of it capped. We were negotiating with the federal authorities at the time to get the permission to, and the state authorities to reopen some parts of it and compact some of the ash, because we had a waste-to-energy facility nearby, and we're going to put some more ash in there. But, at the end of the day, you were going to run out of space. And that's really what the idea behind the master plan was. Where are we going to be in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15 years? Where is all the waste going to go, and how are we going to handle it? One of the things that came out of that exercise was, we had to sort of manage how we finance this operation differently, and that's why we established the enterprise fund. Just like you have one for wastewater, water, parking, we made one for solid waste over there, and we said we're going to operate this more like a business. We're going to say this is how much it costs, and this is how much we need to raise to make it separate from the tax levy. And initially there was a cross subsidy between the general fund and the enterprise fund, but then we're getting to the point where it was self-sustaining. It was operating on a fee basis, and again, it was based on volume. So, you had different size bins, and there was a different structure for residential units and so forth. But, that was one aspect of it, to make it run, knowing what it costs and paying for it, so it's self-sustaining. And then, of course, the other aspect of it was how to make it more efficient. And I know you guys you've made strides toward that. Your recycling rate is going up, and you changed the way you do it. And, this is one of the big targets for any urban community, to be able to get this recycling rate up for obvious reasons, which is your diversion rate, so you don't have as much trash to get rid of, because it's more expensive than getting rid of recycling. It does cost money to get rid of it, but it costs less. So that was the second prong of it. And the third prong was, where do we put it? And we had contracts with, several companies that would haul it away to a different place. And but in the master plan, one of the ideas was to make a regional authority, recovery authority, and set up one of the plasma gasifications units. So we would actually burn this trash into oblivion, so to speak, and the byproduct was, one of the bitumens that would go into making pavement, and we could sell it. So that was sort of the long-term approach on what to do with it.
Okay, thank you. And it sort of leads to my second question. I see you also highlight on your resume that you're a certified public purchasing official in Massachusetts, and you mentioned contracts and the solid waste agreements. And there are certain services that aren't required, as you know, to be bid in Massachusetts, nor to go through any solicitation process. I'm a believer that you get the best bang for the buck when you do go out for solicitation. What's your thoughts? What's your experience in whether it's solid waste that's not required to be bid, or any other service, whether it's an audit function, independent audit, or
Well, there are exemptions, as you pointed out.
there are exemptions, right?
So, your consulting services, legal services, these type of things, you don't have to bid under state law. Whether it's a good idea, that's another matter. And I think I'm with you on that one. Unless you know what's out there, how do you know if you're getting the best deal? So from my experience, we usually bid, I bid anything and everything, and we standardized procedures, and a lot of times schools were exempt from the bidding to a large extent. And once we consolidated the purchasing function between the city and the school, we made one set of rules. Everybody bids everything. And, you also have the economies of scale to an extent, because now you're buying together, which you haven't done before. And the same goes for regional purchasing agreements and piggybacking, and using tools like reverse auctions, which is one of the things we did in Connecticut, where this is sort of a, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept, but the reverse auction is almost like eBay for business, and the contractors bid on the services the city needs, but they see each other's bids, and it's all legal. I mean, it's one of those things where they bid against each other and get to the lowest price. So there are different ways of doing it, but competitive procurement is the key, and I think you should do it for everything that makes sense to do it for, because it will yield the best result. One of the things that I wasn't able to do, we actually bid the legal services in East Providence, but we weren't able to get a consensus between the school and the city to get one legal counsel for both. And but we did bid that competitively, and we had an RFP for our city solicitor services. So
You did. Is there a branch of a city solicitor branch or department?
Yes,
On both sides, the school committee and the council?
that's right.
There is.
Yeah.
So these legal services were in addition to, or for?
No, they would have been in lieu of. There
In lieu
would have been, one law firm representing both, unless there was a conflict, in which case they would be able to retain their own. But we were unable to bring it to a successful conclusion. But everything else I can think of that touches either school or the city, it's a good candidate for competitive procurement.
Okay, this is a good segue into my next question, which was consolidation of departments or services that you mentioned both as city manager in Providence and I believe also in Vernon. But before we get before I get to, your sense behind how to consolidate and what was the impetus behind that, can you tell me, you have a municipal court, there was a municipal court in Providence,
In East Providence,
in
yes.
East Providence, run by the city?
Yes, it was run by the city. We did consolidate it with the clerk's office.
Right.
Because we thought that, sharing staff was a good idea. We still had the court administrator, and we had the appointed judges to run the cases. But as far as, sharing space and staff and having just one space for it, that's where we consolidated.
Was that a full-time court, full-time positions in the municipal court, or on an
There were full-time positions because they were shared. Before then, there were part-time positions as far as staff,
and what type of activities would they adjudicate?
it was anything from municipal fines to parking tickets, some small criminal stuff, but anything bigger went to district court.
Oh, thank you, that's interesting. Am I getting close to my 10 minutes, Mr. Manager? 2 minutes? Okay. Well, just very briefly, with these successful consolidations, can you touch upon some of the key elements of those?
As I mentioned before, I think the most important thing is not only to find the right person to do it that wants to do it, but also have the buy-in from both of the bodies on the city and school side, because this is the hardest sell a lot of times. How do we take something that we've done independently for the longest time and bring it together and hope it works? The way it usually, that I was able to sell it is to say, let's try it first. So, we have this new person, they're gonna come in, they have no vested interests, hopefully on either side, and although sometimes I had somebody that was a longtime employee and decided to do it. And let's try it on a 6-month basis renewable, and then extend it again, if it works, and then make it a yearly and go forward. So there was basically no finality to it from the start, and I think that's what sells it in this sort of divided environment at first. And once you start showing successes in it, then everybody says, let's just leave it that way. This is working. And I think especially on the financial side, it was a huge win because we had one set of books, we had one system all of a sudden. Finally, we got the same reports, and we knew where we were during the year, and that never happened before. So maybe to some extent it was the benefit of the new system, but people all of a sudden worked together, and they were sitting in the same room. I was able to actually bring all the school administration into the city hall because I had room, which was a great opportunity for me. And people learned to work together. So I think by showing that it's going to work, you sort of solidify that concept, and then you're able to move on to other areas. And, we did it for IT and facilities and so forth. One of the key things, and I'm not sure if I'm running out of time on this one, but is the union aspect, of course. You're going to have different collective bargaining units, and, I can't cut your grass because your grass is different than my grass. And those things, you have to work overtime and get the MOUs, and at the end of the day, you're sometimes able to consolidate the bargaining units into one and say, you guys are all maintainers, or you're all painters, or, whatever. And that doesn't happen overnight. You have to get there, and that was one of my experiences.
We agree during a time where we see shrinking revenues at all levels of government and still the same demand for services. We've got to start looking at some of those items you mentioned on consolidating. So it's good to hear that there are some measurements, there are some metrics of success. So I thank you for your responses to all my questions.
Thank you.
Next individual will be Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Peter.
How you doing?
Thank you for applying for the position. If we could go back to what Council Belanger touched on, or was speaking to you about, one of his questions had to do with economic development, and then you had said that you would split that, and that so that essentially you separated the marketing component out, I think. Would that be a fair way to?
I said, I'd split that in Vernon. There was, and I think an example that we discussed because it was part of my experience. I'm not sure if, that's the approach here. It's obviously, my concern would be similar in terms of, is the city doing everything it can do in terms of its growth and marketing itself? So whether it happens on a consolidated or a split basis, that's however it works best for the city. And if you have the right staff in place, there's no reason to fix something that's not broken, so to speak.
Right. The reason I went back to it is because I like the idea, and I think that probably in many communities, there's not enough focus on the marketing part. Planning and development departments, and there's one in just about every city. They don't focus enough on marketing, so I think that's important. And one way to make, I think, people be more accountable for that is to separate it right out, so that you'd be responsible for the performance on marketing. But you had mentioned that in Vernon, that in the first year, you were able to fill up 15% of your inventory?
Yeah, 15%. Yeah, we're able to, basically properties that have been sitting there for years. And we were able to move them. And, as it turned out, it was for the lack of trying. We weren't able before to have any sort of cohesive plan on how to market these. And then once we had that plan and we put it into action, these sales did happen.
Okay, and so that 15%, would that be commercial property or industrial property, or is that just a
It was
combination?
a mix of commercial and industrial. There were no residential properties on that list.
All right, and what would be the time period for that, just roughly?
That happened within the first year of when the program started, so.
Okay, and the program started about what year?
In 2009.
Okay. Do you have any idea of how the program's doing now?
I do keep in touch. I understand that it's progressing. That first wave was obviously not indicative of future progress. Maybe, you're not going to get 15% every year, but, they do progress pretty well at a good clip. It's not as, big as it was in the beginning, just because the best properties, so to speak, are gone. So now you have to work harder to sell the other ones.
Do you know what percentage was vacant in the first place?
It was about half,
Okay.
yeah.
And so when you say 15%, is this lease or sales?
It was a combination of lease or sales, because some of them were owned by developers or, held by other entities, and then those were leases, but some of them were vacant, and sometimes they were foreclosed, and those are the ones that were sales.
Okay. And so then you said that you tried to do the same, to implement the same thing in East Providence later on.
Yes.
But that you weren't quite as successful there.
Well, yeah, I started that a little bit later over there, because, for the first year or so, I was trying to make payroll over there. That was my biggest headache, how do I pay people at the end of each week? And, once we got over that hurdle, there was time to look at some longer-term things like that. But one of the things we did was, again, something similar, where we put the list together of all the properties, and we actually hired a commercial broker to market these properties, because we tried to do this in-house in the past, and it just didn't work, because people didn't have either enough time or skill to go out there and do it. So, we offered them, we hired them competitively, using competitive bidding. We hired a firm, gave them a percentage of the sale, and although we reserved, if we sell it ourselves, they get like half, there was a provision in there for their commission. So we had some limited success with that. I think we sold 3 or 4 properties in the first 2 or 3 months, and that I know of.
What would be the size of those properties roughly?
See, these weren't that big. It was 2 old libraries, because we used to have 4 libraries there. We downsized to 2. And then those 2 libraries then became vacant and surplus property. So we sold those 2 libraries. One of them was bigger, so that it was sold as sort of an art studio, and then the other one was converted to a private residence. It was sort of small. And then we had a couple of lots that, again, the neighbors bought, to build something on. And then we had one commercial property that somebody converted into a warehouse. So those are the surplus properties that, we focused on
Okay.
over there.
I think that's a good idea anyway, so hopefully those communities will keep that going. It'll,
Yeah, I hope so too.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you were speaking to Counselor Rourke at the very beginning, you mentioned that there were problems with I think, well, maybe I'm not characterizing correctly, but there was trouble with the city council in East Providence, and that there were several times when you would advise them to go one way, and they chose to go a different way.
I think but my overriding concern was, I was part of the transition team over there with the state, when the state came in and kind of turned things around financially. And there was a 5-year fiscal plan. So it's fairly simple, to stay on track, you gotta stick with the 5-year plan. If you start deviating from it, that's where the trouble starts, because you sort of fall into the pattern that led to the problem in the first place. And I think that's where, a lot of my disagreements would be, to say, let's stick to the plan. We gotta set the reserves aside, because that's what the rating agencies like. That's what I upgraded as 5 notches, since I came in. Let's, do things that are in this 5-year plan. This way we'll stay the course. But it's very easy to get the temptation all of a sudden when you have surplus, when you have things, that you didn't see in years, a pool of money, let's fix the streets, let's do this, and I think, it's very hard to be the only person that says, let's stick to the plan.
Okay, and so when you said that there were several instances, were they all connected to the 5-year plan?
There are disagreements, some of them I just can't go into because they're
Sure.
personnel-related or legal matters, but there were certainly discussions around the 5-year plan. One of the things that I felt pretty strongly about was the synchronization of their tax year. The problem they had over there is they ran on a November through October fiscal year basis, but their tax receipts were coming July through June. So for half a year, you were out of money. You had to borrow for half a year to run the city.
This is in East Providence?
Yes.
Is it all of Rhode Island like that?
No. This is the only city left in Rhode Island like that.
Okay.
There were quite a few, and then they all got from under it. They developed synchronization strategy, either through a synchronization bond or over a period of years, 1 month at a time, to get to synchronize. And it's hard to imagine because you obviously run a July city, so your receipts come in over time. You don't have this issue, but when you do have this issue, you have to get rid of it to get healthier fiscally. And when all of a sudden if it's in a 5-year plan and somebody tells you, nah, let's not do that. Well, this is integral part of it, because if you don't do it, in the next year or so, you're going to be running a $20 million deficit again. So those are the type of disagreements that sort of hard to get over, I suppose.
If you are selected to be the next city manager in Lowell, would you accept the job without a contract?
No.
Okay. When you were in East Providence, how did you get along with the delegation there? Or how did you, one of the things that I think several members of this council think is important is that the administration work well and be in sync with the delegation. And I think when you do that, it ends up being better off for Lowell. How did that, was it similar in East Providence, or?
It was very similar, and we were in a very fortunate position that we had both the House and the Senate leaders right from East Providence, in terms of the fiscal committees, finance committees. So we were able to advance a lot of agenda for East Providence because we had local representation. There was also the leadership in both House and the Senate. So, that was a weekly call or a meeting just because we had a lot of business to do. We had to get our school aid early to help us balance the budget, and those things happened because we had a good relationship.
So are you saying that the chairman of Ways and Means for the Senate and the House side, or their counterparts, both came from East Providence?
Yes.
So you didn't have to worry about running out of money, did you?
No. We just had to work closely with them, which is the idea. Whether they are from your city or not, you have to work closely with them to kind of impart the agenda of the, where the city is, where it's going, and what they can do to help. And a lot of times they can't help, but you got to have that open dialogue.
Okay. Let me ask this, and this might not be a fair question, because although you've been here a couple of times, you're not that familiar with the city, but if you were to be the next city manager and you were here, and you knew that you were gonna be here for 5 years, what would be your strategy about, regarding economic development going forward?
Again,
Or maybe
yeah.
another way to ask the question, if I could, would be, what is your vision? Like, how would you see your tenure as city manager here if you were successful?
In terms of economic development or in general? In terms of economic development?
But
Well,
yeah.
obviously, this is one of the key areas where, you know, as we talked before, you run out of savings at some point, and you have to think about growth of your revenue base, and I think this is where it is. You know, your revenue is going to grow through economic development, so this is one of the main things that the city manager has to focus on and make sure it's successful. So, you know, you have the right people, you do the right things. Sometimes that means, you know, private partnership to get things moving. And there has to be very defined performance measures. In other words, you know, if you have an inventory to go through, you know, you got to have milestones. And I know the city stat will probably be, or Lowell stat will be very helpful with that to set up these parameters and, you know, the key goals and measurements for this type of a program beyond what's already there.
In your career so far, and in the communities that you've been in, what would you cite as being the most substantial economic development initiative in any of those? And what was your participation in that?
I think the biggest one I've been sort of involved in on the ground level was this huge residential development in East Providence, where again it was property that's been vacant for years, had contamination issues, so there was a big cleanup component to it. It was a TIF project, and it was the largest residential development, over 400 units in the state of Rhode Island in like 20 years. So, you know, hugely successful, I think. We had a developer that worked with us very well. Everybody bought into it, including the council, the public. We didn't have any issues, you know, legal issues. But it was, you know, we worked on it for a year and a half before we brought it to fruition.
And that'd be Kettle Point?
Yes.
Is that, okay.
Yeah, Kettle Point.
And so what was your role in that? I mean,
I had to bring everybody together.
okay,
Yeah, that was my role. You know, there were countless meetings where, you know, I had very qualified planning and economic development staff that, you know, did a lot of groundwork, but at the end of the day, you had to bring everybody together. We had, you know, these meetings set up for the council members, for the members of the public, you know, for the neighbors, obviously, for all the different departments that were part of the permitting process to keep it all moving. And, you know, that was my role, to make sure it kept moving and, you know, we met all the milestones.
okay. Was it a situation where a developer came to the administration and said, listen, I'd like to do something at Kettle Point, and then you put it all came together after that?
We had 2 or 3 different firms looking at it, and we settled on this particular developer, you know, as our final choice. But there were other people interested initially in the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have more time? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Next member that's going to ask questions will be Mr. Leahy. Council Leahy.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for coming. There's not much to ask left here. Could you describe in more detail, what would your approach be to, say, hiring a CFO for Lowell?
I'll be looking for someone that wants to be part of, you know, the city management for a while. You know, if it's a CFO, you know, you want someone that's hungry to do it, that's not gonna look at it as a stepping stone to another job. You really want that person to be here for a while, I think it'll be my concern. On the other hand, you also want the person to have maybe a fresh look at things. So municipal experience is good, but I don't think it's, my mind, necessary, for a CFO of a large organization like Lowell. It's a big budget. Whether your experience is from a private sector or a public sector, that wouldn't be the biggest thing to me, I think. I'd be more looking for the right fit and the willingness to look at things maybe a bit differently, to run it, well, to improve, and to stay. Because the institutional knowledge is hugely important in the fiscal area. When you lose people in that area, it's hard to recover. I served as a finance officer, not by choice, for a few months, and tell you, that was a lot of work. You want someone on board that's been there and it's willing to stay there and kind of carry the team with him or her.
Okay, thank you. If you were selected as city manager of Lowell, could you describe your first day and your first week on the job?
Obviously, I would meet with everybody. You don't want to make a mistake of putting your agenda on the table and say, this is what I like to do. What you want to do is first observe and really kind of learn, what's going on beyond what you could learn from, looking at the financial statements or reading the paper. It's a process that, sometimes takes weeks, maybe longer, just to get yourself oriented, what the priorities are, who everybody is, where, what they want as well, not just what you want. And, that's been my approach most places I worked, other than being thrown into, the middle of the budgeting process, which I was a couple times. But it's a learning process on both sides. I think, when you work in a new team, people have to learn about you, but you also have to learn about what's going on. And that's really my first step usually, just to find out, talk to everybody, and find out what their priorities are, what are the things that didn't get done, what are the things that are going on right now that have to be done, and so triage the priority list. So, you get a priority list from the council, you get a priority list from department heads, saying those are the things that have to be done right now, and this is why, and only then your priority list comes in at the end, I think. So this will be my approach.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Could you, well, let's see. We have a situation here in Lowell coming up where we've got a tight budget this year. We're looking to maybe add more policemen, and we're also looking to keep our school spending at 100%. Could you describe your approach to that type of a budgeting situation?
So you're talking about the 4 positions for the police department?
4 or 5.
4 or 5, yeah.
Police, public safety, obviously very important. Education, very important to bringing people to Lowell, keeping people in Lowell.
Well, with the maintenance, let me address the school side first, which is the maintenance of effort issue, really. And I think, the goal should be to meet the maintenance of effort. And, whether you go beyond it, that depends on your means in any particular given fiscal year. But whatever you do, it's going to get built into your maintenance of effort the year after. So that's why it's a sort of slippery slope. So, you do your best. And I think the benchmark is right now that you are over 50%, which is, a very good benchmark for, a lot of cities and towns in Massachusetts. But you were still short, I think, on the MOE. So I think you want to get to it. And obviously, this is largely dependent on what you get from the local aid. It's Chapter 70. It's mostly school money anyways, 42% of it or so. So you do get some help, but you get challenges in the charter school area, where your assessment for charter schools is out of the ballpark. And, it's hard to make it up from the, in the general levy. So those will be the challenges going forward. So you want to meet the MOE. On the other hand, you have to, figure out what to do with the charter school question. On the public safety side, if you need 4 more officers, you need 4 more officers. Hopefully you get some retirements coming down the road so you can sort of keep the force constant as far as the count. But maybe there's an opportunity for looking at overtime to some extent, realigning some of the positions. I know in Springfield, we promoted a whole bunch of people to get rid of overtime, because initially we had more on the captain salary side, but then we got rid of a lot of lieutenant overtime. So, there are things to maybe realign some of the positions so that let you add people on the lower end if you restructure some of the compensation on the higher end, and, you increase the count of the boots on the ground as far as public safety.
Okay. Let's see. And I guess, could you elaborate more on what your interpretation of the bond rating is, and how a city like Lowell, how do we keep that, what the benefits are, and your understanding of it?
It's one of the most important indicators of your financial success. I think it's very objective rating. Standard & Poor's did a pretty good job, I think, explaining their rationale in their most recent March rating action for City of Lowell. And so did your previous ratings, and, they have been going up, which is great. But as I said before, I think that's one of my major guiding posts in my own priorities. How do I align priorities in the management of the city with the priorities of the rating agency? Because they are objective benchmarks of success. So if these guys tell me that, I need to beef up the OPEB trust, those are the things I should be doing. If they tell me that I should be investing in infrastructure so I don't run into trouble later, that's what I should be doing. And, modeling the proposed budget in a way that's going to reflect these priorities. And those are objective things to rely on to say, if I do this, my rating will go up. If my rating will go up, I'm going to pay less for debt service. If I'm going to pay less for debt service, I'm going to have more money for schools, and so forth. So it's a domino effect of doing the right things and reaping the benefits of it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next member of the City Council will be Councilor Martin.
Okay, thanks, and welcome, Peter. Thanks for being here this evening. Interesting to hear your views on a number of these topics. I want to go back, I think, to some points that other councilors have made about economic development. I think, your background, your resume seems to show a strength, I guess, in fiscal management. You worked in Springfield on the control board. You said you had trouble in East Providence. You turned that around. So there it does seem to be some ability there. And but we think, at least I think, we've turned around already. So we don't, as much as those experiences might be helpful, I'm looking at sort of sustainability of what we've achieved and more economic growth. I mean, we're coming out of a pretty dismal economic picture in this country, and it's been hard up until now. But I'd like to talk about some of the things maybe you've done there. When you talked about the commercial broker was that in Vernon?
Well, we had one in Vernon, and I had one in East Providence too. I had a commercial broker that was marketing the surplus municipal properties, and also reaching out in terms of some business attraction and retention through different trades. So it's one of the things, not because you're going to run out of properties to sell or lease.
Right.
You got to figure out how to maybe branch into the areas that you haven't done before, how to redevelop certain areas or think about them differently. And I think that's where somebody strong comes in, and, whether it's an internal team or a combination of internal team and private input on how to do it right.
So were you able, you did talk about the commercial broker being a success for the municipal property, but what about the second part of that, what you just said, this team of public-private, did that work anywhere?
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well in East Providence. We had a string of successful either business retentions or, new businesses coming in there. We had a couple of German manufacturers that relocated to the area, and, I always talk to these people as they move in and they set up the shop, and say, what attracted you to the area? Because I'm trying to learn as well.
Right.
What makes let's say East Providence, a good area to move to, because you know that the tax rate is high. You know that you pay people a lot of money, it's Northeast. Energy's expensive. So what really made you come here? And you learn about, a lot of it is about your geographic location. A lot of it is about the ease of doing business in the city. A lot of it is about having access to a skilled labor pool. So those are things that then you hone in on and say, those are the things I got to sell, because that's what attracts people to my area. I shouldn't be touting the lower electricity rate because I don't have one, but, I should be focusing on things that brought these people here. So that's sort of where the focus shifts in my
What kind of
experience.
industry was that?
Light manufacturing. We had 2 light manufacturing companies that came in, making wire components, like elevator cables, things of that nature. Some injection molding manufacturers. We had aerospace company that set up a shop. There was an American company. So you had high-tech, good-paying jobs, and again, it was a facility that was in the right location for them. They had access to the skilled labor pool, and they moved from another location that just got too old for them, too small. So, those are things you just have to keep working on and make sure that you bring those successful outcomes.
So would you say it was the labor force in those cases anyway that was more the determining factor? Access to
It
the
was one
labor
of the
force?
major determining factors for the, again, skilled manufacturing facilities that moved in. We didn't have a lot of success with, low-skilled labor facilities. I think that time is gone for Northeast in a large respect, but, the skilled manufacturing, you can attract service, those type of industries.
And would you think we could have some success with that here, from what you know about Lowell?
I would think so. I mean, you have still, several areas where, you could look by the canal and, I mean, there's obviously a room for growth. And as far as the demographics of the area, they're very similar to some other larger cities I worked at where we had that success, so.
Anything like that in Springfield?
Springfield had some success. I wasn't as heavily involved in Springfield in economic development. I was more focused on the finance side and some organization development there. But I'm aware of a couple projects. One of them was a big data facility that came in.
Right.
That was big. And
Is that operational yet, do you know?
as far as I understand, yeah, they're up and running. And there was a big call center for Liberty Mutual that, located there, so.
Okay. Also about Springfield, you listed here, you worked on a 311
Yes.
call service and somehow integrated that with Munis. Am I reading that right? Or
Well, yeah.
is that two separate things?
I was wearing many hats, but,
Yep.
The transition to Munis was one of my jobs over there in a few areas where we went from an older system to Munis, and that transition had to be done, and a lot of work processes had to be developed for people to work in a new financial system. But the 311 was there was a creation of a whole new department. One call to the city hall was sort of the tagline, and that's how it worked. So instead of calling and trying to get through, a particular line at any of the division you were trying to reach, you would call this one number, 311. And it was staffed from, we had to create it from scratch. So we basically tapped different departments for personnel and say, I know you kind of do customer service here, so now you're going to be part of this new 311 system. So whether they were physically in one location at the city hall, they were just, co-located at their own facility, they were all part of the same team on the same system. And it allowed residents and businesses to get to the right person quicker. There was an intake involved, just like in any call center, and there was collect routing. There was a case number assigned to every call, and it could have been tracked, make sure it was closed, and it was tied to the constituent request service, very similar to what you have here in Lowell with the click and fix it was a different name, but it was the same
Right.
idea. And this thing was in an infancy stage when we first started setting it up, and, it's been running ever since, so.
So was there automation with their city stat program?
The city stat wasn't as involved with it. City stat was more on the performance management side, just like it is here, with the Lowell stat. You kind of look for ways to do things better and then report on the progress, finding ways of better efficiency. The 311 was truly a call center, making sure that the calls and requests got routed properly, that they were recorded in the system and they were acted upon. And if the call wasn't closed, in a certain period of time, it would be escalated to the right person.
Okay. How am I doing on time, Mr. Manager? All right. All right, so just quickly, Councilor Samaras asked about partnerships earlier. For example, we have a national park here. A lot of their sort of jurisdiction is the downtown. There's a lot of overlapping things and a lot of economic development projects that we want to get off the ground. They have impact on because they either have redevelopment standards or they have ownership of properties we would like. Any background dealing with, sort of federal bureaucracy or other agencies where you really need to partner with them to get to the desired result?
Mostly on an environmental regulatory side. I dealt mostly with the state and federal agencies with those aspects on redevelopment. So, it was their standards. One of the biggest things I worked on was in East Providence, the wastewater facility, where we were under consent order with the federal government, and we had to deal with their bureaucracy to renegotiate a lot of ways we comply.
You have combined
with that water.
sewer? Is it combined sewer and
No,
storm?
they were separate.
They're separate. Okay.
Yeah, and actually that is, I'm glad I thought about it, because that was one of the things that I was going to mention earlier, and it sort of escaped me, but that's one of the things I started working on but never finished in East Providence. It was the long-term lease on the wastewater facility. A lot of times, there's not a lot of rate stability. You're always playing catch-up on the rates, make sure you got enough reserves, you got everything right in the system. And we're negotiating with United Water on the agreement, long-term lease agreement, where we'd be able to lease the assets to them for a period of 25 to 30 years and get some rate stability and, some of the benefits of it for the rating agencies, because your liabilities would go on your balance sheet for that period. So,
At least to a private operator.
to an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, you can structure it any way you want.
Right.
You could have your own staff doing it, but the idea was, this is one of those things that you can look at that maybe you haven't in the past, at the long-term lease agreement, and see how this could help you with your balance sheet, as you struggle with other problems.
All right, thank you.
Next member is Council Rita Mercia.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Grazikowski, and thank you for your interest in Lowell. And it's very hard being second to last and having practically all my questions already answered, so I'm going to do the best that I can. And when you talked about your response to someone that said a very important component here is that there's no CFO, and you said you'd like someone to be here for a long time, to stay. And I agree with that. That's especially important to me. And I remember when you submitted your application, your resume in 2006, you at that time lived in Long Meadow, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, you live in Edgartown now, right? I see from your resume that you were the city manager in East Providence, Rhode Island from 2011, 2013, 2 years. You were the assistant town administrator for the town of Vernon, Connecticut from 2009, 2011, 2 years. DPW Service Director for the City of Springfield, Mass., 2007, 2009, 2 years. Then you were the project manager in the City of Springfield Division of Finance, 2 years. Is that your magic number?
No, I think it's an indication of, being able to get sort of the next step in a professional development, and those particular circumstances you described. Some of these were internal advancement opportunities, obviously, like for the city of Springfield, or, you know, I had a 12-year tenure at the previous employer with the city of Chicopee, which you haven't mentioned, but, you know, there's a point in the professional development where you have to get to the next skill set, and I think that's what it exemplifies, being able to transition from, let's say, human resources director to the assistant town administrator to the city manager. And I would have liked to stay at my last job longer if I could, but I wasn't given the opportunity, so,
Well,
you know.
you're not interested in the governorship, are you? 'Cause I
No,
wouldn't want you
no,
to stay
no,
here a while and then leave. But then you talked about how you're very interested in working with people and have a good rapport, and you mentioned boards and commissions, but my concern is, what part do you see neighborhoods play in the health of the city? Because they're very important to us. How are they important to you?
Well, I think the neighborhood involvement is very important, and from what I understand, the prior city manager had the program that was part of, you know, his office, the neighborhoods program, and, you know, this is something that definitely has to be kept going and developed further. In my experience, it was very important to meet with neighborhood associations, let's say in Springfield, whenever we had a new program, and try to explain it to people and have that public forum to sell it to. The same in East Providence, let's say, you know, when we had public hearings on rates, let's say, on wastewater rates that, you know, we had to raise for the few years. And it was important to go neighborhood by neighborhood because that's how the city was structured. It wasn't one cohesive unit sometimes where everybody would just show up. You had to go to the neighborhood to sell a particular program or idea and to get the feedback. So I am familiar with the process, and I think it's important if it serves its purpose well, which I think it would in Lowell.
Some years ago, we had a former city manager, and he established a neighborhood impact team, and it carried on. Would you continue the the manager's neighborhood impact team, which goes into a particular neighborhood and looks at all the problems and tries to fix it, whether it be lighting and street repair and dilapidated buildings? Would you carry on that initiative?
I would certainly look at it, see if, you know, it operates at its best interest, you know, for the entire city, and if that's a good approach, or if it adds to the entire benefit for the city, that would be a good program to continue. I don't know enough about it, but it sounds like it worked really well, so if it does, it should be continued.
Will you rely on asking us questions about how to function in this city, and like, would you rely to ask us questions as to your concerns about, would you include us in your?
Obviously, yeah, it's, you are the representative of the people that elected you, so obviously you are their voice to a large extent, so I would like to know what the priorities are.
Right. Tell me your best quality.
I think my best quality would be my professionalism.
You're a professional?
Yes.
In what respect?
I can work for anybody. I have the same respect for everybody that I work for. And, you know, my main objective is to provide the best information I can give you for you to make a decision, and then once you make a decision, to deliver it.
So you're a problem solver?
I would consider myself one, yes.
Do you have a good rapport with the people that you work with in government?
99% of the time.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Next individual, Council Jim Milanazzo.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest in the position, and thank you for coming to the interview prepared. I'm impressed that you've done your homework, and you talk like you have obviously followed the successes that we've had over the years, so thank you for coming prepared. I'd like to touch upon regionalization, if I could. Lowell is a founding member of a group called Middlesex 3 Coalition, going from Lowell south to Burlington, working with the various communities, just looking at ways where we can probably work together from an economic development standpoint, certainly, but also a way we can begin to look at regionalizing some of the services. Can you just give me your thoughts about a regional approach to providing services? Again, since revenues are, again, we all struggle to generate revenue in order to operate, in our case, a $300 million budget. Is there a way, in your professional opinion, that we can regionalize some of the efforts that we're trying to put forward?
I think there's some low-hanging fruit for a lot of municipalities, and, some of them are administrative programs, like, let's say, assessment services. When you look at this type of service, you ask yourself, why have nobody ever done it before? And I think that, Rhode Island was sort of a microcosm of these services where people started doing them together just because it's such a small state, but they still have 39 cities that can really use the same service. So there's no reason why Massachusetts could do it on a larger scale. And there are some programs out there where you can tap into, the state bid list. But, you could probably do better on the regional basis because your interests are more aligned regionally than sometimes statewide. Because, you may not need the same service as a little town that's got 5,000 people. You're gonna need service that, a city that's got 100,000 people uses. So, this is sort of my approach to it, use regionalization, but in a way that makes sense. Buy services together, go to bid together, maybe do some things together, as long as they make sense geographically and demographically. A good example might be a dispatch service. Again, it's the size of the community that would allow you to sort of offer maybe some of this service to surrounding communities that right now struggle to provide that service themselves. So, those are the type of things you can look at and say, long term, is this going to make sense for Lowell, not just to do something together with someone, but perhaps be the leader in this type of regional consortium and offer this service to other people and then just charge back for it.
Okay. Thank you. We have a conversation, or maybe it could be classified as a debate going on right now about parking in the downtown. And the city over the last few years has gone through changing the parking system to a kiosk system. And we're actually, it's at the Economic Development Subcommittee level now, talking about, is the parking program, we do have a parking enterprise fund, is the parking program to generate revenue for the city, or is it to really manage the parking that's taking place in the downtown? I'd just like to hear your thoughts on what you see that aspect or that tool being. Is it a revenue generator, or is it to really manage the turnover, if you will, of parking in the downtown?
Well, I used the kiosk on the way in here, so I know what you're talking about. But, you got a $6 million operation, for your parking enterprise fund. And at the end of the day, you need to manage parking because this is an urban planning issue. How do you manage parking in a city? Because it has a lot to do with economic development to an extent. You want to provide ample parking for people that are downtown to do business, to go to a store, to go to a restaurant, make sure they have parking. You got to worry about people that live, near the street, and they have a place to park. So there are all these things you got to manage. So you got to have one. And then, the concept is, do you really want to make money on it, or you just want to make enough money to pay for it? I think, to some extent, you may want to make money on it, but it has to be reasonable. It has to really accommodate, the needs of the operation. It's, you have an enterprise fund, which is a great, it's a great setup because you're really paying for what it costs you to do, plus you get your fines, and that's, that's your revenue as well. But at the end of the day, my concept on it would be, manage it well so it fulfills the needs of the city and its residents and people that visit, and pay for its operation, invest in the infrastructure because you got some debt service in there, you got to pay for all the stuff you bought, and, it shouldn't be ultimately, I think, the huge revenue maker for the city.
Okay, thank you.
Not my estimate.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that you did look at our FY14 and our FY15 projections coming forward. Were you surprised that we have $39 million in operating reserves in 6 different accounts, I guess is one question. And then we also have $12 million in excess levy limit currently. How do you see, what recommendation would you make to the council going forward? And do you think that the rating agencies would at some point say to us, you really need to start tapping into the excess levy before you do this?
Well, I think the agency already said that. You know, if you read the detailed report from Standard & Poor's, that, you know, that they will be looking to raise more revenue. Because by tapping into your reserves to pay for operating expenses is an indicator of financial weakness, so you don't want to do that. So obviously, you want to look at the revenue side. You brought another interesting question, which is you have it in different places. As long as it's in the right places and you have access to it, you're okay. But, you know, you have to know where it is and you have to have access to it, because if you put it all in free cash, then it's got to get certified and you got to have access to it. So you want to keep it in reserve accounts that are accessible to you because they have liquidity, which again is a positive for the rating agency.
How do you see going forward, putting additional funds into the OPEB trust fund? I think we put $7.8 million there, and our liability, unfunded liability going forward is an enormous number.
It's a very unsexy thing to do, because nobody thinks you need it right now. And there is no mandate from the state that really tells you you have to do it or something will happen. So it's a difficult decision to make, because you're investing in your future and the soundness of your financial future. And I'm a strong believer in it. You know, in East Providence, I was able to put 100% ARC for both OPEB and the pension plan, the local pension plan, going forward, and hopefully it will be maintained. I don't know, but you know, that was one of the key aspects of the financial plan, to make sure that there is a finite amortization schedule that you're working toward, and in less than 30 years, you're going to get to 100% funding. And unless you make that plan and stick to it, you're never going to get there. You're just going to keep re-amortizing it, and you're going to come up with the same problem.
I understand that our school department is going to put an RFP out to look for new administrative office space. They were in the downtown for a number of years, and they moved to a school that was not being used, but now, based upon population growth, they're looking to move to another location. As city manager, would you advocate that location, again, going through a public process, but that space be located in the downtown area so that you would have 75 to 150 school department employees in the downtown every day, taking part in the shopping and the restaurants and so forth?
It would be ideal if it was possible. You know, the question is, how much is it going to cost, and is the benefit to cost ratio, you know, cost prohibitive to really do it that way? I know Springfield had the same issue. They had a dilapidated school administrative building, and they ended up renting space in a federal building, you know, on State Street down there. And, you know, the price per square foot is pretty high. So they had everybody downtown, but, you know, that controversy kept going for years as to whether it was a good idea or not, because that lease was very expensive. So, again, it's you know, you got to take all these things into consideration. And ideally, yes, you probably would like people downtown. You would like to close to the city hall, because you're going to be doing things together, hopefully, you know, going forward, you know, on these back office functions. And it would be good to have people close to each other instead of traveling all the way across, you know, town to talk to each other.
Right. My last question has to do with the economic development aspect. And again, having done your homework, you're familiar with the Hamilton Canal project that we've been working on for the past 5 or 6 years. The issue right now is just trying to keep that project moving forward. We have a commitment from the delegation, from the state, to put in a new courthouse of, I think, the cost of close to $300 million. And I guess my question is, how do you see the city manager's role in making sure that a project like that, and then we do also have another urban renewal project called the Ayer City redevelopment project. How do you see the city manager's office playing a key role in making sure that those economic development major initiatives for Lowell continue to move forward?
Well, like you said, I want to make sure they're moving forward. They're moving forward consistently, you know, with the master plan, you know, with the priorities of the council, of the residents, making sure that the city benefits most from these projects. So, you know, if it's a new courthouse, that's great, but, you know, you're also going to think about all the planning issues that go with it, you know, urban planning issues, you know, the parking, the increased traffic, you know, how it all fits with the plan, with the master plan, and whether any changes have to be made there. But your role as a city manager, I think, is to look at those big picture things and make sure you have staff doing work every day on it, report back to you. Make sure that the city's interests are protected in any of these development opportunities.
Great, okay. Are you familiar with the name Arthur Robbins, being down in the East Providence area?
A little bit,
A little bit.
yeah.
Mr. Robbins actually developed what's now the Inn and Conference Center, but he actually developed it as the, I believe it was a Hilton Hotel when we first did one of our major downtown, we'll call it evolution plans, but back in the 80s. So I just was wondering if you were familiar
Okay.
with the name.
Yeah, no, I heard of the name.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, thank you, Peter.
All set, Council. Well, Mr. Grazikowski, this concludes the second phase, I suppose, of the interview process. First, the opening statement and line of questions from members of the City Council. So we'd like to invite you to up to a 10-minute closing statement. You've been going for quite some time. We appreciate you taking all the questions, and so please feel free if you'd like to provide a closing statement.
Try not to take entire 10 minutes on you, being late hour, but just to reiterate, again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the city's challenges and opportunities. This is a very interesting and exciting career opportunity for me that I would love to take on if I was given the chance. I think based on everything I heard and I know about the city, this is a good fit. And this is definitely not a stepping stone for me, not looking for a governorship. But I'd like to stay for a long time if given the opportunity and be part of the team. I would like to ask you, if we had a couple minutes, what are the biggest three things you would like to see happen? I've heard economic development, over and over and over again, which for obvious reasons. But what are the biggest challenges as you see them that the city manager should tackle in the long term, and in the short term and the long term? I'm not sure if there's going to be a different answer from everybody, but this is what I'd like to know.
Undoubtedly, there'll be different answers from 9 members of the council. I think generally speaking, many of the questions asked really pertain to economic development. I think there were, I think you found that there were many questions, clearly financial issues that were also discussed, moving forward, challenges of continuing to provide services along with maintaining taxes, the tax rate, or stabilizing the tax rate. So I'm not sure if there are, clearly public safety issues. I think we touched upon a little bit, and quite frankly, I think those are the 3 main issues moving forward. Clearly, economic development is the priority, or one of the priorities in this next term. Members of the council, I'll open up to members of the council.
I would
Councilor Martin?
like you to keep us in the loop. What you know, I think you should share what you know with us. That's important to me.
And
Communication,
Yeah.
communication back and forth. That's my number
I'm glad
one.
you brought that up because, that was one of the things that I thought was very important as well. In my last job, I had a biweekly update that, I had reports from all the departments, and I made all the department heads come to all the meetings, with the council, because I said, even though it may be no items on the agenda that relate to your department, you should be there, because you gotta know what's going on, and they may have questions for you. So I had this biweekly update, and I think that was pretty informative, at least to the, council persons that read it, but it was a constant feedback as well, because then I would get questions back and follow-ups, and I thought it was important as well.
Council Martin, did you have a question?
I would just add education. I think the funding for education tends to be formulaic, so we lose sight of that sometimes, but I think it is a priority of a lot of us here because it's the foundation for everything else. We talked about the educated workforce, and you had experience with that, and I think if you have kids that are going to school, they're not in trouble with the cops and things like that, so that's obviously important to us too.
Other members, Council Samaras, and then Council Milonazo.
Thank you. The one thing, Lowell's been a unique city. I think you did allude to that. I mean, with what some of the things that Father National Park, Patrick Morgan started, his dream of what the city can be, the work of Paul Songus and other people who have come along. And it's really about partnerships, and it's really about getting people to be willing actually to take a chance. When we built the Songus Arena, the baseball park, these were things that, had to be sold to the community as something that would help change the city in a better way. So how do you see yourselves fitting? I mean, do you see yourself being able to sustain that type of growth? That's what we're looking for. I mean, you can talk about economic growth, but included in that is the safety of our citizens. And we really didn't talk about that enough tonight, because that's a major concern. And if the city's going to grow economically, it's going to have to be safe. So it's like tying these things together. So, I mean, how are you at, we'll say, taking the pieces of the puzzle and making them a picture? Does that help?
And, I think that's really what it's all about. Can you put the pieces of the puzzle together to make the city as successful as you can? And if that priority list includes those, 3, 5 big things, that's how you evaluate my performance. So, were you able to meet the goals we gave you and, make the city more successful? And if economic development is a big part of it, that's one of the main, foci of the administration.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Councilman
Thank
Milanazo.
thank you, Mayor. I think picking up on Council Martin's comments about education, and again, you looked at the FY15 numbers, and again, we have 2 very good charter schools here in the city, but the reimbursement keeps going down from the state. And I know I believe there's a bill pending at the state legislature to try to look at that again. And I think that's something that is concerns this council, very much, to make sure that the manager works with the state delegation, works with the city council, and gets the message to the governor's office that the charter school expenses that have risen, we need to make sure that we get the reimbursement in order to not hurt the public school side, where the net school spending, as you know, was an issue the last 2 fiscal years. We want to make sure, and I'm sure you as manager would want to make sure that we meet that obligation. So that's another concern. The charter school expense and the costs associated is something that the next administration is really going to have to pay attention to.
Okay.
Thank you.
All set? Okay. Again, thank you, Mr. Grazikowski. We appreciate you coming to Lowell. We appreciate you taking close to 2 hours to respond to our questions. And if there's no further business, we thank you, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. By Council Martin, second by Council Milanazo. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and they opposed. So ordered. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you very much for your time.